The morning sun barely touched the horizon when Marcus Rodriguez stepped onto the concrete pad at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado, California. His boots made a sharp clicking sound against the surface as he adjusted the weight of his tactical vest. The air was thick with the smell of ocean salt and diesel fuel from the boats moored nearby. Today would be different from the usual grueling physical training sessions that had pushed him and his fellow candidates to their limits for the past 8 weeks. Marcus had joined the Navy with one goal in mind: becoming a SEAL. Growing up in a small town in Texas, he had watched his older brother serve in the Marines and come back with stories that both inspired and terrified him. Unlike his brother, Marcus wanted to be part of the most elite fighting force in the world. He wanted to be among the few who could say they had earned the trident that symbolized the SEAL Brotherhood. The training had been brutal from day one. Physical conditioning that made college football practice look like a warm-up. Mental challenges that pushed candidates to question everything they thought they knew about themselves. Sleep deprivation that turned simple tasks into monumental challenges. Many of the men who had started the program alongside Marcus had already quit. Some had been forced out due to injuries. Others had simply decided they could not handle the pressure. But Marcus was still here, along with 23 other candidates who refused to give up on their dreams. Instructor Chief Petty Officer James Patterson stood before the group, his weathered face showing no emotion. Patterson had been training SEAL candidates for over 15 years. His reputation was legendary among both instructors and trainees. He was known for pushing people beyond what they believed possible, but also for being fair and never asking anyone to do something he had not done himself during his own operational career. "Gentlemen," Patterson began, his voice carrying easily across the training area, "today we begin urban warfare training. Everything you have learned up to this point has been preparing you for what comes next. In the real world, you will face enemies who do not follow rules. They will use every advantage they can find. They will try to kill you using methods that textbooks cannot teach you to counter." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. Urban warfare training meant close-quarters battle scenarios. It meant learning to fight in buildings, hallways, and confined spaces where a single mistake could mean death for an entire team. It also meant working with explosives and specialized equipment that could be just as dangerous to the user as to the enemy. Patterson continued his briefing. "You will be working in teams of 4. Each team will rotate through different scenarios throughout the week. Today, we start with room-clearing operations using flashbang grenades." The mention of flashbangs made several candidates exchange glances. Everyone had heard stories about training accidents involving these devices. Flashbangs, officially known as stun grenades, were designed to temporarily blind and deafen anyone in their blast radius. They were considered non-lethal, but that did not mean they were safe. When used incorrectly, they could cause serious burns, permanent hearing damage, or worse. Patterson led the group to a concrete building that had been constructed specifically for training purposes. The structure was designed to simulate a typical urban environment that SEALs might encounter during real operations. Multiple rooms, narrow hallways, staircases, and various obstacles created a realistic setting for practicing the techniques they would need to master. "Before we begin the practical exercises," Patterson said, stopping in front of a table loaded with training equipment, "you need to understand exactly what you are working with." He picked up a flashbang grenade from the table. The device looked deceptively simple: a small metal cylinder with a pin and safety lever, similar in appearance to a regular hand grenade but lighter in weight. Patterson held it up so everyone could see it clearly. "This device produces approximately 1 million candela of light and a sound blast of around 170 decibels, he explained. For comparison, standing next to a jet engine produces about 140 decibels. The light is equivalent to looking directly at the sun from just a few feet away. The effects typically last between 15 and 30 seconds, which gives you time to enter a room and neutralize any threats." Marcus listened carefully, knowing that his life and the lives of his future teammates would depend on understanding every detail of the equipment he would use. Patterson demonstrated the proper way to hold, arm, and throw a flashbang. He showed them how to count the timing, how to position themselves to avoid the blast effects, and, most importantly, how to coordinate with team members to ensure everyone was prepared for the explosion. The most common mistake, Patterson emphasized, is failing to communicate properly with your team. If one person is not ready, or if someone is in the wrong position when the device detonates, people get hurt. In training, that means a trip to the medical facility. In combat, it means your teammates die. The instructor then divided the candidates into teams. Marcus found himself grouped with 3 other men he had come to know well over the past 2 months. There was David Chen, a former college wrestler from California who never seemed to get tired no matter how hard they were pushed. Next to him stood Tyler Williams, a quiet guy from Georgia who had worked as a police officer before joining the Navy. The 4th member of their team was Jake Morrison, a mechanic from Michigan who could fix almost anything and had an infectious sense of humor that kept morale high during the toughest training days. Team leaders, step forward, Patterson called out. Without hesitation, Marcus stepped forward. He had naturally fallen into leadership roles throughout training, and his teammates seemed comfortable following his lead. Patterson handed him a training flashbang and a detailed instruction card. Read through the procedures, Patterson instructed. Make sure every member of your team understands their role. You have 15 minutes to prepare before we begin the first exercise. Marcus gathered his team around the instruction card and began going through the step-by-step process. The exercise seemed straightforward enough. They would approach a room where instructors had placed training targets representing enemy combatants. Marcus would arm and throw the flashbang through the door. After the explosion, the team would enter the room and neutralize the targets using training weapons loaded with marking rounds. Chen studied the room layout diagram on the instruction card. Looks like a standard rectangular room with targets positioned in the corners and center. Should be simple enough. Williams nodded in agreement. Just like the simulations we practiced last week, except with the added flashbang element. Morrison was examining the training grenade that Patterson had given them. This thing feels heavier than I expected. The weight distribution is different from the practice dummies we used. Marcus appreciated that his teammates were taking the exercise seriously. He had seen other teams in previous training cycles where overconfidence or carelessness had led to accidents. Remember, he said, communication is key. I will call out each step as we execute. Everyone needs to acknowledge that they understand and are ready before we proceed to the next phase. The team spent the remaining preparation time walking through their movements without the actual grenade. They practiced their positioning, their entry sequence, and their target engagement. By the time Patterson called them forward for their turn, Marcus felt confident they were ready. Other teams had already completed their exercises. Most had performed well, with only minor mistakes in timing or positioning. One team had been forced to repeat their exercise when their flashbang had bounced off the doorframe and exploded in the hallway, but no one had been injured. Patterson led Marcus and his team to the training room. The space was about 12 feet by 15 feet, with thick concrete walls and a steel door. Several target silhouettes had been positioned throughout the room to simulate enemy positions. A small observation window allowed instructors to watch the exercise from a safe distance. Remember, Patterson said as he handed Marcus a live training flashbang, this is not a drill. This device will produce real blast effects. Follow your procedures exactly as you practice them. Do not deviate from the plan under any circumstances. Marcus felt the weight of the grenade in his hand. It was noticeably heavier than the training dummy they had used during preparation. The metal surface was cool against his palm, and he could feel the texture of the safety pin under his thumb. Team ready? Marcus called out. Ready, came the response from all 3 teammates. Marcus positioned himself next to the door, with Chen directly behind him and Williams and Morrison flanking the entrance. This was the standard formation they had practiced dozens of times, designed to provide maximum firepower while minimizing exposure to enemy fire. Arming device, Marcus announced as he pulled the safety pin from the flashbang. The metallic ping of the pin hitting the concrete floor seemed unusually loud in the quiet training area. Device armed, counting down, Marcus said, beginning the standard 5-second count that would give him time to throw the grenade and get clear of the blast area. 5, 4, 3. At the count of 2, Marcus released the safety lever and threw the flashbang through the door opening. The device should have landed in the center of the room and exploded approximately 2 seconds later, giving the team enough time to prepare for entry. But something went wrong. Instead of the expected explosion from inside the room, Marcus heard a different sound, the metallic clinking of the grenade bouncing off something hard. In the split second that followed, he realized what had happened. The flashbang had hit the doorframe and bounced back toward their position. "Grenade out!" Marcus shouted, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was too late. The flashbang exploded less than 6 feet away from the team's position. The blast was unlike anything Marcus had experienced during his time in training. The sound hit him like a physical force, driving deep into his ears and making his entire head feel like it was trapped inside a bell that someone was striking with a hammer. The light was even worse, a brilliant white flash that seemed to burn through his closed eyelids and into his brain. Marcus found himself on the ground, though he could not remember falling. His vision was nothing but white spots dancing in front of his eyes. His ears were ringing so loudly that he could not hear his own voice, though he was fairly certain he was shouting something. Somewhere nearby, he could sense movement and what might have been voices, but everything seemed to be happening underwater or from very far away. He tried to stand up but immediately fell down again as his sense of balance completely failed him. Through the chaos in his head, Marcus began to realize that this was not supposed to have happened. The flashbang should have exploded safely inside the room, not in the hallway where he and his teammates were positioned. Something had gone seriously wrong with their execution of the exercise. As his vision slowly began to clear, Marcus could make out blurry figures moving around him. He assumed these were instructors and medical personnel responding to the accident. The thought that came to him next made his stomach drop. What had happened to Chen, Williams, and Morrison? Marcus tried to turn his head to look for his teammates, but the movement sent a wave of nausea through him that nearly made him throw up. He could taste blood in his mouth and wondered if he had bitten his tongue during the explosion. From somewhere that seemed very far away, he heard a voice that might have been Patterson shouting orders. The words were completely unintelligible, but the tone was urgent and commanding. Marcus understood that the situation had become serious enough to halt all training activities. As the minutes passed, Marcus's hearing slowly began to return, though everything still sounded muffled and distorted. The first clear words he could make out were from a medical technician who was checking his pulse and examining his eyes with a small flashlight. "Can you hear me?" the medic was asking. "Do you know where you are?" Marcus tried to respond but found that his voice was hoarse and shaky. "Yes, training. Coronado." "Good," the medic said. "You are going to be okay. We need to check you for injuries and then get you to the medical facility for a more thorough examination." As his vision continued to improve, Marcus could finally see what had happened to his teammates. Chen was sitting against a wall about 10 feet away, holding his head in his hands. A medic was talking to him and checking his ears. Williams was on a stretcher being examined by 2 medical personnel. Morrison was standing but leaning heavily against a wall, looking dazed and confused. The relief that all 4 team members were conscious and moving was overwhelming. Marcus had heard stories of training accidents that had resulted in permanent injuries or worse. While he knew they were all hurt, at least they were alive and responsive. Patterson appeared in Marcus's field of vision, his face showing a mixture of concern and professional assessment. "Rodriguez, how are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," Marcus managed to say. His voice still sounded strange to his own ears, but at least he could speak clearly. "That is about what I would expect," Patterson replied. "You and your team just experienced a close-range flashbang explosion. You are lucky that these are training devices with reduced explosive charges, or we would be having a very different conversation right now." The implications of Patterson's words hit Marcus immediately. In a real combat situation, a mistake like this could have killed all 4 team members. The thought was sobering and humbling at the same time. "What went wrong?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Patterson's expression became serious. "That is exactly what we are going to find out. But first, we need to make sure you and your teammates are medically cleared. Then, we will conduct a thorough review of what happened and why. As medical personnel helped Marcus to his feet and began moving the team toward waiting vehicles, he caught sight of the other candidate teams watching from a safe distance. Their faces showed a mixture of concern for their injured classmates and fear about what this meant for their own training. Marcus knew that this incident would become a learning experience for everyone involved. But, right now, all he could think about was the fact that he had made a mistake that could have seriously injured or killed 3 men who had trusted him to lead them safely through the exercise. The ride to the medical facility gave Marcus time to think about what had gone wrong. As his hearing continued to improve and the ringing in his ears subsided, he began to replay the events in his mind. The throw had felt right when he released the grenade. The timing had seemed correct. But, somehow, the device had bounced back instead of landing where it was supposed to. Had he misjudged the distance to the door? Had the angle been wrong? Was there something about the weight difference between the training dummy and the real device that had affected his throw? These questions would need to be answered, not just for his own peace of mind, but to prevent similar accidents from happening to future candidates. The medical examination revealed that all 4 team members had suffered temporary hearing damage and flash blindness, but no permanent injuries. The doctors explained that the effects should continue to diminish over the next several hours, and that they would be monitored overnight as a precaution. As Marcus lay in the medical facility that evening, staring at the ceiling and listening to the gradually decreasing ringing in his ears, he thought about the conversation he would have with Patterson and the other instructors. He knew there would be consequences for what had happened, and he was prepared to accept responsibility for his mistakes. But, more than that, Marcus realized that this experience had taught him something crucial about leadership and the weight of responsibility that came with it. In a few months, if he successfully completed his training, he would be leading real operations where mistakes would have permanent consequences. The men who served with him would trust him with their lives, just as Chen, Williams, and Morrison had trusted him today. The Flashbang incident had failed to go as planned, but it had succeeded in teaching Marcus a lesson that no classroom instruction could have provided. He had learned what it felt like to make a mistake that put his teammates in danger. He had experienced the crushing weight of responsibility that comes with leadership in high-stakes situations. As he drifted off to sleep, Marcus made a promise to himself. He would learn from this experience. He would become a better leader because of it. And he would never again take for granted the trust that his teammates placed in him when they followed him into dangerous situations. The road to becoming a Navy SEAL was far from over, and Marcus knew that this incident would stay with him for the rest of his career. But he also knew that the lessons learned from failure often proved to be the most valuable ones of all. The next morning arrived with the sound of reveille echoing across the Naval Special Warfare Training Center. Marcus opened his eyes in the medical facility, immediately noticing that the constant ringing in his ears had finally stopped. The silence was almost startling after hours of the high-pitched tone that had made sleep difficult despite his exhaustion. A Navy corpsman entered the room carrying a clipboard and medical equipment. "Good morning, Rodriguez. How are you feeling?" Marcus sat up slowly, testing his balance and coordination. "Much better. The ringing stopped, and my vision is back to normal." "Excellent. Let me run through a few quick tests, and then we can talk about getting you released." The medical evaluation confirmed that Marcus had suffered no permanent damage from the flashbang exposure. His hearing had returned to normal levels, his vision showed no signs of lasting effects, and the minor cuts and bruises he had sustained were already healing. "You were fortunate," the corpsman explained as he completed his paperwork. "Close-range exposure to flashbangs can cause serious injuries. The reduced charge in the training devices probably saved you and your teammates from much worse consequences." Across the room, David Chen was going through a similar examination. Tyler Williams had been released an hour earlier, and Jake Morrison had been cleared the previous evening. As Marcus gathered his belongings, Chen approached him with a serious expression. "How are you handling all this?" Chen asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. "I keep thinking about what could have happened if that had been a full-charge device, or if we had been carrying live ammunition during the exercise." Chen nodded. "I have been thinking the same thing. But I want you to know that none of us blame you for what happened. We all knew the risks when we signed up for this training. That does not make me feel any less responsible, Marcus replied. I was the team leader. It was my job to execute that throw correctly and keep everyone safe. And it is also your job to learn from what went wrong and make sure it does not happen again, Chen said. That is what separates good leaders from great ones. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Chief Petty Officer Patterson. His expression was unreadable as he approached the two candidates. Rodriguez, Chen, you are both cleared for duty? Yes, Chief, they replied in unison. Good. We need to conduct an after-action review of yesterday's incident. Report to conference room B in 1 hour. Williams and Morrison will be there as well. Patterson paused, studying Marcus's face. Rodriguez, I want you to understand that this review is not about punishment. It is about learning. Every mistake in training is an opportunity to prevent casualties in combat. Your willingness to take responsibility and learn from what happened will determine whether you have what it takes to be a SEAL. The hour that followed gave Marcus time to prepare mentally for the review session. He knew that he would need to provide a detailed account of his actions, accept responsibility for the mistakes that had led to the accident, and demonstrate that he understood what needed to be done differently in the future. When the 4 teammates gathered in conference room B, they found Patterson waiting along with 2 other instructors and a safety officer from the training command. The room was set up with a whiteboard, video equipment, and a table displaying several training flashbangs identical to the one that had caused the accident. Gentlemen, Patterson began, the purpose of this review is to understand exactly what happened yesterday, identify the factors that contributed to the accident, and develop lessons learned that will prevent similar incidents in the future. He gestured to the whiteboard, which showed a detailed diagram of the training area where the accident had occurred. We will reconstruct the events step by step, starting with the team preparation and ending with the detonation of the device. Marcus took the lead in describing the team's preparation process. He explained how they had studied the procedures, practiced their movements, and verified that everyone understood their roles. The instructors took notes and asked clarifying questions about timing, positioning, and communication. Now, Patterson said, let us talk about the execution phase. Rodriguez, walk me through your actions from the moment you armed the device. Marcus stood up and moved to the diagram on the whiteboard. I positioned myself here, next to the door frame. Chen was directly behind me, with Williams and Morrison flanking the entrance as planned. He traced his movements on the diagram as he continued. I armed the device by pulling the pin, announced the countdown, and released the safety lever at the count of 2. I threw the grenade through the door opening, aiming for the center of the room. Stop there, interrupted the safety officer. Show me exactly how you threw the device. Marcus picked up one of the training flashbangs from the table and demonstrated his throwing motion. The instructor watched carefully, analyzing his grip, release point, and follow-through. Your technique looks correct, the safety officer observed. But, let me ask you this, did you account for the weight difference between the training dummy and the live device? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. In all their preparation, they had practiced with lightweight dummy grenades. The actual flashbang had been noticeably heavier, but, in the stress of the moment, he had not adjusted his throw to compensate for the additional weight. No, Marcus admitted. I threw it with the same force I had been using in practice. The extra weight would have caused it to fall short of the target area. Patterson nodded grimly. That is correct. Instead of landing in the center of the room, the device struck the doorframe and bounced back toward your position. The reduced distance to the blast point put all 4 team members in danger. The revelation was both enlightening and frustrating. Such a simple oversight had nearly resulted in serious injuries to his entire team. Marcus felt a renewed appreciation for the attention to detail that SEAL training demanded. This type of mistake is more common than you might think, one of the other instructors added. It is why we use reduced charge devices for initial training. Real-world operations do not allow for learning curves. The review continued with each team member describing their perspective on the events. Williams noted that he had noticed the grenade bounce but had not had time to react before the explosion. Morrison mentioned that he had seen Marcus's throw appear to be too low but had assumed it was intentional. Communication, Patterson emphasized. If Morrison had immediately called out that the throw looked off target, there might have been time for the team to take cover or at least brace for a close-range blast. The instructors then shifted the discussion to lessons learned and procedural improvements. They talked about the importance of practicing with actual device weights, the need for continuous communication during explosive operations, and the value of having contingency plans for when things go wrong. Rodriguez, Patterson said as the review session neared its conclusion, "What is your assessment of your performance as team leader during this exercise?" Marcus had been dreading this question, but he knew that his answer would be crucial to his future in the program. "Chief, I failed to adequately prepare my team for the differences between training conditions and live exercise conditions. I failed to adjust my technique to account for the weight variation in the device. And I failed to establish proper contingency procedures for equipment malfunctions." "That is a harsh but accurate assessment," Patterson replied. "However, I want to add some context. This type of learning experience, while dangerous, is exactly why we conduct these exercises in controlled environments with safety measures in place." Patterson stood up and faced the four candidates directly. "Every one of you demonstrated courage, teamwork, and professionalism during and after the accident. None of you panicked. None of you abandoned your teammates. You all followed medical instructions and cooperated fully with this review process." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "These qualities are just as important as tactical proficiency. In real combat, things will go wrong. Equipment will malfunction. Plans will change. Your ability to adapt, support each other, and learn from mistakes will often mean the difference between mission success and failure." The safety officer then presented the official findings of the incident investigation. The accident had been classified as a training mishap caused by procedural error rather than equipment failure or instructor negligence. No disciplinary action would be taken against any of the team members, but additional safety protocols would be implemented for future flashbang training. Going forward, the safety officer explained, all teams will be required to practice with weighted training devices that match the specifications of live grenades. Additionally, team leaders will be required to demonstrate proficiency with live devices in isolated environments before conducting team exercises. As the formal review concluded, Patterson asked Marcus to remain behind for a private conversation. The other three team members left the conference room, and Marcus found himself alone with the chief instructor. "Rodriguez, I want to discuss your future in this program," Patterson began. Marcus felt his heart sink. After everything they had just discussed about learning from mistakes, was he about to be dismissed from SEAL training because of one error in judgment? "Sir, I understand that my mistake could have had serious consequences," Marcus began, but Patterson held up a hand to stop him. "Let me finish," Patterson said. "What I saw yesterday was not just a tactical error. I saw a young leader who took immediate responsibility for his actions, who put the welfare of his teammates above his own comfort, and who demonstrated the kind of integrity that we need in our special operations forces." Patterson walked over to the window overlooking the training area where other candidate teams were conducting exercises. "Do you know how many team leaders have tried to blame their teammates, the equipment, or the instructors when accidents like this occur? More than I care to count." He turned back to Marcus. "Leadership is not about being perfect. It is about taking responsibility when you are not perfect, learning from your mistakes, and becoming better because of them. Yesterday, you showed me that you have what it takes to be a SEAL." The relief that washed over Marcus was overwhelming. He had been prepared for the worst possible outcome, and, instead, he was being told that his response to failure had actually strengthened his position in the program. "However," Patterson continued, "you are not out of the woods yet. You will repeat the flashbang exercise next week with a different team. You will need to demonstrate that you have learned from this experience and that you can execute the procedures flawlessly under pressure." "Understood, Chief. I will not let you down." "I know you will not," Patterson replied. "But, more importantly, you will not let yourself down. The man who threw that grenade yesterday was operating on basic training and theoretical knowledge. The man who will throw it next week will be operating on experience, wisdom, and a deep understanding of what can go wrong when details are overlooked. That afternoon, Marcus rejoined his regular training activities with the other candidates. Word of the Flashbang incident had spread throughout the group, and he found himself answering questions about what had happened and what he had learned from the experience. Some candidates seemed nervous about their upcoming explosive training sessions. Others appeared to view the incident as a cautionary tale about the importance of following procedures exactly. A few seemed to use it as motivation to push themselves even harder in their preparation. Marcus appreciated that his teammates and fellow candidates were supportive rather than judgmental about the accident. It reinforced the sense of brotherhood that was developing among the men who had survived the rigorous selection and training process. That evening, as the candidates gathered for their evening meal, Jake Morrison approached Marcus with a serious expression. "I wanted to thank you," Morrison said. "Thank me for what?" Marcus asked, genuinely confused. "For not throwing us under the bus during the review," Morrison replied. "You could have mentioned that I saw the bad throw and did not speak up. You could have pointed out communication failures from the rest of the team. Instead, you took full responsibility as the team leader." Marcus shook his head. "We were all learning together. Pointing fingers would not have helped anyone become better." "That is exactly why you are going to be a great SEAL," Morrison said. "And why I would be honored to serve with you again in the future." The conversation reminded Marcus of something Patterson had said about the importance of supporting teammates and maintaining unit cohesion. The Flashbang incident had created an opportunity for him to either build stronger relationships with his fellow candidates or to damage them by shifting blame. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself reflecting on the broader lessons of the past 24 hours. He had learned technical lessons about equipment handling and tactical procedures. But, more importantly, he had learned about leadership, responsibility, and the kind of character that would be required for the challenges ahead. The path to becoming a Navy SEAL was far from over. There would be more tests, more opportunities to fail, and more chances to prove himself worthy of the trident. But Marcus felt confident that yesterday's failure had prepared him for future success in ways that easy victories never could have. The Flashbang had failed to detonate where it was supposed to, but it had succeeded in teaching Marcus and his teammates lessons that would serve them well throughout their military careers. Sometimes the most valuable training came not from executing plans perfectly, but from learning to recover when everything went wrong. 1 week after the Flashbang incident, Marcus Rodriguez stood at the same training facility where everything had gone wrong. The concrete building looked identical to before, but his perspective had changed completely. Every detail seemed more significant now: the texture of the doorframe, the exact dimensions of the room, the distance from the throwing position to the target area. Chief Petty Officer Patterson had assigned him to lead a new team for his redemption exercise. The 3 men standing with him were candidates from a different training group who had not witnessed the previous week's accident. This was intentional, Patterson had explained. Marcus needed to prove that he could execute the Flashbang procedures correctly without the psychological burden of leading men who had already been injured under his command. The new team members were Tony Vasquez from Arizona, a former Army Ranger who had cross-trained to join the SEALs, Michael Kim from Hawaii, a Navy electronics technician who spoke 3 languages, and Robert Turner from Alabama, a former college quarterback who had given up a potential NFL career to serve his country. Marcus had spent the entire week preparing for this moment. He had practiced throwing weighted objects until his arm was sore. He had studied the physics of projectile motion and calculated the exact force required to place a grenade in the center of the target room. Most importantly, he had developed a detailed checklist of every step in the process, leaving nothing to chance or memory. "Team, gather around," Marcus called out as they approached the training building. His voice was calm and confident, masking the nervousness he felt inside. The 3 men formed a semicircle around Marcus as he spread out a laminated diagram of the room layout and tactical approach. Unlike the previous week, when he had relied primarily on verbal briefings, Marcus now used visual aids and written checklists to ensure every detail was covered. "Here is our objective," Marcus began, pointing to the diagram. We have a 12 by 15 foot room with multiple hostile targets positioned throughout. Our mission is to neutralize all targets using a flashbang grenade followed by immediate room entry and engagement. Vasquez studied the diagram carefully. His ranger background made him naturally cautious about urban warfare scenarios. What is the throw distance from the entry point to the optimal detonation location? Marcus appreciated the detailed question. Approximately 11 feet, accounting for the doorframe width and the desired landing zone in the center of the room. I have practiced this exact distance repeatedly using training weights that match the live device specifications. Kim raised his hand. What is our contingency plan if the grenade bounces or fails to detonate as expected? The question hit directly at the heart of what had gone wrong the previous week. Marcus had prepared extensively for this exact concern. If the device does not enter the room cleanly, I will immediately call misfire and we will take cover behind the reinforced barrier to our left. We will wait for instructor guidance before proceeding. Turner nodded approvingly. What about timing? How long do we wait after detonation before entry? Standard procedure is 3 to 5 seconds, Marcus replied. However, we will wait for my specific command before moving. I will assess the blast effects and confirm the room is ready for entry before giving the order. Marcus then walked each team member through their individual responsibilities. Vasquez would be the primary breacher, responsible for rapid entry and engagement of targets on the left side of the room. Kim would provide cover and engage center targets. Turner would clear the right side and watch for any threats that the other two might miss. Questions or concerns? Marcus asked after completing the briefing. The three men exchanged glances but remained silent. Marcus could sense that they were confident in the plan and ready to execute. Patterson appeared at the edge of the training area, accompanied by the same safety officer who had conducted the previous week's accident review. Several other instructor personnel positioned themselves at observation points around the building. Rodriguez, is your team ready? Patterson called out. Yes, Chief. Team is briefed and prepared for execution. Patterson approached the group and conducted a quick inspection of their equipment and positioning. He checked Marcus's flashbang to ensure it was properly armed and verified that all team members were wearing appropriate protective gear. Remember, Patterson said, looking directly at Marcus, execute your plan exactly as briefed. Do not deviate from your procedures under any circumstances. The emphasis on following procedures was clearly a reference to the previous week's mistake. Marcus understood that this exercise was not just about completing the mission, it was about proving that he could learn from failure and perform under pressure. Team, move to positions, Marcus commanded. The four men approached the building and took their assigned positions. Marcus could feel his heart rate increasing, but his hands remained steady as he prepared to arm the flashbang device. The weight of the grenade felt familiar now after a week of intensive practice. Team ready? Marcus called out. Ready, came the synchronized response from his three teammates. Marcus pulled the safety pin from the flashbang, listening for the distinctive metallic sound that indicated the device was now armed. Unlike the previous week, when he had rushed through this step, Marcus took an extra moment to ensure his grip was correct and his throwing stance was properly balanced. Device armed, counting down, Marcus announced. 5, 4, 3. At the count of 2, Marcus released the safety lever and drew his arm back for the throw. Time seemed to slow down as he focused on his target point in the center of the room. He could visualize the exact trajectory the grenade needed to follow to clear the doorframe and land in the optimal position. The throw felt perfect as soon as he released the device. The grenade sailed cleanly through the door opening without touching the frame. Marcus immediately moved to his cover position and began counting the seconds until detonation. Grenade away, prepare for blast, he called out to his team. 2 seconds later, the flashbang exploded with the same incredible intensity that Marcus remembered from the previous week. But, this time, the blast was safely contained within the target room, exactly as planned. The light flash illuminated the doorway briefly, and the sound reverberated through the concrete structure. Blast complete, team ready, Marcus announced after verifying that the explosion had occurred in the correct location.
Execute, 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 he commanded.
The four men moved into the room with practiced precision.
Vasquez led the entry, immediately engaging targets on the left side with his training weapon.
Kim followed closely behind, acquiring and engaging the center targets. Turner swept to the right, clearing his assigned sector. Marcus entered last, maintaining overall command and control while providing backup engagement capability.
The room clearing operation took less than 10 seconds from entry to completion. Room secure, all targets neutralized, Vasquez reported.
Marcus conducted a quick visual inspection to verify that all training targets had been successfully engaged.
Satisfied with the results, he called out to the instructors watching from their observation positions.
Exercise complete, room cleared and secured. Patterson entered the room along with the safety officer and 2 other instructors.
Their faces showed no emotion as they conducted their own assessment of the exercise results. Solid execution, Patterson said after completing his inspection. Clean entry, proper target engagement, good communication throughout.
The safety officer examined the blast pattern on the walls and floor where the flashbang had detonated. Perfect placement, he observed. Device landed exactly in the optimal position for maximum effectiveness. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. The exercise had been executed flawlessly, proving that he had learned from his previous mistakes and could perform under pressure when it mattered most.
Team, excellent work, Patterson announced. This is exactly how flashbang operations should be conducted.
Rodriguez, you demonstrated outstanding leadership and tactical proficiency. As the team gathered their equipment and prepared to leave the training area, Vasquez approached Marcus with a grin on his face. I heard about what happened here last week, Vasquez said quietly. That took guts to come back and face the same challenge again. Marcus shrugged modestly. Everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes. The important thing was proving that the lesson was learned.
Kim overheard the conversation and joined them.
In my previous job, we had a saying, the best engineers are the ones who have broken the most equipment. You cannot really understand how things work until you have seen what happens when they do not work.
Turner nodded in agreement. Same thing in football.
You learn more from the games you lose than from the ones you win, as long as you are paying attention to what went wrong. The conversation reminded Marcus of something Patterson had said about the value of failure as a learning tool. The flashbang incident had been painful and embarrassing, but it had forced him to examine every aspect of his leadership and tactical skills in ways that success never would have. Later that afternoon, Patterson called Marcus to his office for a private debriefing session. The chief instructor's office was decorated with photographs from various SEAL operations and training exercises spanning his 15-year career. Marcus noticed several pictures showing teams conducting the same type of urban warfare training that had nearly ended his own career just 1 week ago. Sit down, Rodriguez, Patterson said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Let us talk about what happened today and what it means for your future in this program. Marcus sat down, unsure whether this meeting would bring good news or bad news. The exercise had gone perfectly, but he knew that his overall evaluation would be based on more than just one successful mission. First, Patterson began, I want to congratulate you on outstanding leadership and tactical execution today. Your team performed flawlessly because you prepared them thoroughly and executed your plan with precision. Patterson leaned back in his chair and studied Marcus's face. But, more importantly, you demonstrated something that we value even more than tactical skills. You showed resilience, accountability, and the ability to learn from failure. The instructor stood up and walked to his window overlooking the training areas where other candidate teams were conducting various exercises. Do you know what separates SEALs from other special operations forces? Marcus considered the question carefully. Superior training and equipment? Patterson shook his head. Every elite military unit has access to excellent training and equipment. What makes SEALs different is our culture of continuous learning and adaptation. We expect our people to make mistakes, but we also expect them to learn from those mistakes and become better because of them. He turned back to face Marcus.
Last week, you made a significant tactical error that could have had serious consequences. Today, you proved that you learned from that error and developed the skills and procedures necessary to prevent it from happening again.
Patterson returned to his desk and opened a file folder containing Marcus's training records. Your performance throughout this program has been consistently above average. Your leadership skills are strong, your physical conditioning is excellent, and your tactical knowledge is solid.
He looked up from the file. The Flashbang incident actually strengthened my confidence in your potential as a SEAL.
It showed me how you respond to adversity, how you take responsibility for your actions, and how you use failure as motivation for improvement.
Marcus felt a surge of pride and relief.
The week following the accident had been filled with uncertainty about whether his career ambitions were still achievable. To hear that his response to failure had actually enhanced his standing in the program was beyond his most optimistic expectations.
What happens next? Marcus asked. Patterson smiled for the first time during the conversation. Next, you continue with the program.
You have 5 more weeks of training ahead of you, including advanced combat skills, underwater operations, and final evaluation exercises. He closed the file folder and leaned forward.
But, I want you to remember something important. Today's success does not erase last week's failure, and last week's failure does not diminish today's success.
Both experiences are part of your development as a leader and as a SEAL.
Patterson stood up, indicating that the meeting was concluding.
The men who serve with you in the future will benefit from both experiences. They will get a leader who knows how to execute missions successfully, but who also understands what can go wrong and how to prevent it. As Marcus left Patterson's office, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. 2 weeks ago, he had been focused solely on completing his training and earning his SEAL Trident. The Flashbang incident had forced him to confront the reality that success in special operations required more than just technical proficiency. He had learned that leadership meant taking responsibility for both successes and failures. He had discovered that the ability to learn from mistakes was just as important as the ability to avoid making them in the first place. Most importantly, he had realized that his teammates' trust and safety were sacred responsibilities that required constant vigilance and preparation. That evening, as Marcus prepared for another day of training, he thought about the path that still lay ahead. There would be more challenges, more opportunities to fail, and more chances to prove himself worthy of joining the SEAL Brotherhood. The Flashbang incident would remain with him throughout his career, serving as a reminder of the importance of attention to detail, thorough preparation, and continuous learning. But it would also serve as proof that failure did not have to be the end of the story. Marcus had learned that true warriors were not those who never failed, but those who failed, learned, and came back stronger than before. The Navy SEAL training program had tested his physical capabilities, his mental toughness, and his technical skills. But the Flashbang incident had tested something more fundamental, his character. He had passed that test not by executing a perfect mission, but by accepting responsibility for his mistakes, learning from them, and proving that he could perform better when given a second chance. In the unforgiving world of special operations, these qualities would prove to be just as valuable as marksmanship, physical fitness, or tactical knowledge. The failed Flashbang attempt had indeed made Marcus and his teammates pay a price in temporary injury, embarrassment, and self-doubt. But it had also provided them with invaluable lessons about leadership, teamwork, and resilience that no successful exercise could have taught them. As Marcus drifted off to sleep that night, he knew that he was one step closer to earning his place among the elite warriors who wore the SEAL Trident. The path had not been easy, and there would be more challenges ahead, but he was confident that he had the character, skills, and determination necessary to succeed.